just kind of a quick intro, this is really what I'm calling the race director's checklist, or I call it my Race Director 101 if you ever go to my website. A little bit of my background is, here's going to be the agenda we're going to cover. My background is I started out in running as a kid, went through grade school, middle school, high school, a little bit of college of running cross country and track. Got to work, stopped running, got back into running, moved to Birmingham, Alabama, started running with friends, ran this race called the Vulcan Run because I was the token female that they needed because we were doing teams. And then, worked a lot with different events as a volunteer because I was new to the city. I didn't live there originally, so I wanted to volunteer and to get to meet people. And so you kind of get a combination of two things because my technical background or my actual background is I'm a project manager, actually by trade in the technology industry. So I've been, back in the day I was installing computers, so I have, an affinity to deal with technology, implementations, software, whatever it is. I love that kind of stuff. So kind of combine those two elements, project management, because you're really organized, and you're a runner, and you can combine those two things together, and boom, you are now our best volunteer. So from the volunteer aspect, that moved into being a race director as well as the track club president. So you are now like totally in control of the destiny of your running organization in your city. So took over a race called the Vulcan 10K at the time. It was beginning to be on its near death. So, as a volunteer, I brought it from what I call the near death into a 2,300, 50-person race in about 6 years. Through that time, I was able to have that particular event on as highlighted in the Runner's World magazine as a, one of the, quarterly events that they highlighted. We were also the national, we were the state championship, our RCA state championships, regional championship, then we moved into the national championship. And then also we were also the RRCA inaugural road race of the year. So hence, if you notice the word championship there, that's why I got my name, Championship Racing. So that's my company. So that kind of led me into, I kind of at 2007, finished out being a volunteer and just decided to do nothing, but got sucked in. As I call it, I'm the accidental race director, if you've not noticed. Accidentally kind of brought in just because of your skill sets. So in 2008, I started my company, and then 3 months later, put my first event on. It was supposed to be around 600 person. It actually turned out to be 1,200 people. So we doubled our numbers in just that 3 months effort of me putting this event on. I'd taken it over from another group, and then it took off, and I'm like, whoa, what happened? And then over the next couple of years, it actually went up to 1,700. It was a 10-mile 5K. And a fun run. And currently now, again, I don't do this proactively. Again, I'm the accidental. Everything's kind of happened organically. So what I do is a little bit different than everybody else does. I'm not a timer, and I don't own races. So what I do is I come in as kind of the consultant, and my primary responsibility is working with charities, helping them put on their event. So it's a little bit different than probably most of you guys here, but I really kind of help deal with the things charities don't want to do. And charities are good at fundraising, getting all that marketing media out about their brand. So basically, I come in and do all the stuff like all the registration. So I do all the website stuff, online registration through RunSignUp. I deal with all the email, most of the email. They do have their own email sometimes, depending on the charity. So I work a lot with those things that they don't want to do. Water stop setup, course management, anything that they don't want to do, I kind of do. So, I get all the time questions. I want to put on a race. Can you help me? So I always ask, so you want to put on a race? Okay. The first question I ask is, are you a 501c3 or other nonprofit status? And the reason I ask that is because if you're not, the IRS will want to know where those funds are coming from. Because if you're a 501c, you have a little bit tax break. If you are just a normal person like myself, you have to pay taxes on any of the revenue coming in. So that's always the first question, and they were like, ooh, when I get that question. And the next question I ask is, have you put a budget together? And if you haven't put a budget together, you need to put a budget together, because that is the first determination of, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to do this? Are you going to make money, or are you going to lose money? And that will be the first, I hate to say this, I actually have races that contact me and I say, here, have you put a budget together? Have you looked at my race website? And, And that turns off a fair number of folks because they're not prepared and ready to do this. They're like, everybody thinks I'm Race for the Cure and I can get 11,000 people to my event. That is so inaccurate. Only Race for Cure can do that because they have a huge momentum behind that. So put the budget together, and up here you'll see, here are your big ticket items. Obviously, and it depends on city, and it depends on where you are. But for us in Birmingham, police are our largest cost. I mean, I'll pay up to, or the race will pay up to $6 grand for a 5K in downtown Birmingham. So that's pretty significant for a 5K event in I think pretty much any city. Sometimes we'll have to purchase venue space. So that's around $2 grand right there for us, typically. So the big item is the t-shirts. Your timing services can also be expensive if you're using chip timing. If you got storage, if you need to do storage of space, that's, what, $200 a month, give or take, so that's $1,200 a year. Advertising, yard signs, those can be expensive. Social media costs for boosting posts, rental expenses, for tables, tents, etc. If you need generators, coolers, other things is, food, ice, your PA system, prize money, and if you have hired help. So those are pretty, that's not a full list, but that's certainly a good list to start with when you want to put a budget together. And then where are your top revenues coming from? Obviously, race entry fees, your sponsors, and we'll get into more of that as we get through here. Vendor booth space, and then, there's some things that you'll get as in-kind value. We do a lot of trading or bartering, so we have like lawyer as sponsors that have nice, lovely printers, and so they'll print our posters for us. So that's a cost recovery. So you add that into your budget, as we'll get into later, but it's at least a cost recovery item. Next thing, if you want to put on a race, you got to have a race committee. One person cannot do it all, and yes, I was that person that did it all at one point. But on race day, I did absolutely nothing other than show up and walk around. And that reason is I basically made sure that I set everything up, got everybody up to speed on the activities, but engaged the committee members into that whole area. So I had, volunteer manager, I had course managers, I pretty much did all the sponsorship, and we didn't really have fundraising back then. It was just a different kind of a race. I had a marketing manager, and I was pretty much the registration manager as well. So I definitely suggest that you divide and conquer, and make sure you have different committees helping you, because one person cannot do it all, and definitely cannot do it all on race day. I can promise you, you cannot do it all on race day. You can try, but you need to be literally, as a race director, I walk around on race day and just make sure, are you good? You have what you need. Are you good? Everybody should be self-sufficient, and you are there to troubleshoot. You shouldn't be doing a particular job. And then the other thing too is I always ask the folks when they call me, it's like, why do they want to put on a race? I said, well, why do you want to put on a race? Because here's how I look at it. Because when I hear about their cause, let's call it, I always think down the path of, what is it going to do to that will help me determine what is your event about, how do you promote that event? Because I've worked with events that are track club oriented and cancer oriented. Two very, very different things. So it's good for me to understand why do you want to put on that event, because we'll be talking about how do we promote and market that event down that stream. I work with a race called RunSignUp 5K, and it's like the awesome race because it's a cool name. It's colon cancer oriented, and that race went from 0 to 1,700 year one, and over 3,700 by year 3, and we've stabled out at about 2,700 now. But it's got the cool theme, it's got a cool name, it's got costumes, and it's festive and fun. It does have a chip timing component to it, so you do have the competitive runners. And I always, as I always say, why you want to put on a race, that kind of helps to begin to build that brand. With Rum Shaker, the brand is, it's all about the butts. Seriously, I mean, so it's about colon cancer. So you always want to build the brand between the charity itself, the race itself, and the logo. And you want to build those things and bring those things together, because I worked on a couple of races where it took us several years to kind of quote unquote bring the brand together. It was a red shoe run, and we had Ringling Brothers over here being a major sponsor. We had Ronald McDonald House over here, but nobody knew how those two elements tied into the race itself. So basically, over the couple of years, we had to rebrand, and we re-logoed and renamed the event to make sure it reflected the brand of the charity and the event. And you know, to be quite honest with you, they make more money now than they did before, because it's all about bringing it in for the charity, because the charity is the major component of that particular event. And that's what I keep trying to drive is with these folks is you want to put on an event, but you've got to differentiate yourself. You've got to be who you are and drive that as part of reaching out to your constituents. Because any particular race, what I have found through time is that if it's colon cancer, if it's breast cancer, if it's MS 150 or whatever, it's those who are affected by that particular area, because you talk about Ronald McDonald House, it's like I keep hearing stories, God, these people helped me when I had, my child was very sick, and they are emotionally connected to that charity. And that's what drives them to even just participate or donate or just be part of or even be a volunteer. So, it's basically knowing who your client is. And I always look at that as, knowing your constituents and how do you attract those people in to participate in your event. So race participants, understand, like I always say, is understand your participants, because you're going to have the fast people. That's usually, anywhere from 1 to 10% depending on the race. Mid-pack runners, those are there that want to be health conscious. And then you also have the health conscious, the walkers, and the ones that support the charity. Your mid-packers, those are the ones that are out there running. Maybe they may not be the fastest guys, but they are certainly out there trying to compete against themselves or be out there with their friends. And it's not so much race participants, but another component of an event is your sponsors. You've got to be cognizant of those guys, and you've got to cater to the sponsors as well. I mean, you cannot forget those guys because, obviously they're going to give you a fair amount of money, hopefully, and you want to keep them coming back. So never underestimate them and never forget them. And then volunteers. It's another piece of the pie from an event perspective. Because you want to keep those volunteers happy. You want to make sure their time is well spent and fulfilled, and that they feel they're contributing. So again, I always look at it as make sure you understand who your client is, and it's really the race participants in different categories. It is sponsors, it is volunteers. And so the next thing I have is just some slides I pulled out of a Running USA, I guess it's really a survey results. And I just want to kind of briefly go through these, because there's a difference between the millennials, as you guys know, and what I call the baby boomers. And so how each of these interact with an event and why they participate in an event and what is their goals and outcomes of the event are vastly different. Obviously the millennials, want to be more out there for running, seeking a fun and a nature, fun in nature, challenging. They're more likely to run with a cell phone. Me, myself, I don't run with a cell phone. That's just not me. But the millennials do, because that is what they do. So, understanding the differences and obviously using the RunSignUp apps give you those advantages for the different spectrums. So anyway, so the technology differences are key. I mean, obviously, we are changing from a social networking perspective. Using these technologies for the millennials is going to be key and critical. And then obviously, what are the key differences between men and women? Obviously, women are becoming a bigger prevalence in racing. Most of my races are well over 50% women, regardless. In the more competitive races, you'll see a higher propensity for men to be a participant, but you'll certainly see almost a 50-50 ratio, at least in the area I am. Now, I'll show you another slide where that is significantly different. But so, understanding that what are your attractors? I mean, a key, as I keep saying, is you've got to figure out what are your attractors, who's your participant, and then how do you attract those people to your event. So this is the demographics that they were talking about from the Running USA. So here they have 37% male and 63% female. That's pretty significant. I mean, that's, okay, so I started running back in the 70s. So, you know, you're looked at as like, what are you doing? So it's changed. I mean, things have changed. Like I told somebody, I said after Joan Samuelson won the Olympics marathon, women running changed. It dramatically changed. And it's just, you know, it's dramatically changed, and it's more now that people understand that you've got to cater to the woman as well as the guy, and because the women are going to bring the family typically, so you got to remember that if you bring mom, or you're going to bring 2 or 3 kids, so hopefully you can get that couple of kids into the fun run. So understanding your demographics, understanding who your participants are is, I think, in my personal mind, key and critical. So kind of getting down to some high-level ideas of, again, you know, setting up your race. And this is kind of the stuff I talk to when a potential race says, hey, I'd like to, you know, start up a race. And I always say, you know, you want to start a race, start thinking about it 9 months to a year in advance, because there's that much planning that has to happen. You know, for year 2 and beyond, if you're, you know, if you've done this once and you've got the same resources that are helping you, you know, you might be able to get away with it 9 months to 6 months in advance. You know, for us down in the South, because I am in Alabama, you know, our prime racing time period is you know, spring and fall. You know, your March, April, May, and then definitely September, October, and November are the prime. You know, we'll have 6 races per weekend in, you know, a 25-mile or even 10-mile radius, which is, I don't know how you guys are, but that's pretty significant. And that's why I keep saying is you need to brand yourself. You need to be a step ahead and think outside of the box. And how do you bring people to your event? What can you do both, you know, from an end user experience, from you know, the time you have information out there about the event, through the registration process, through the race day pickup packet process, through the post-race, you know, results process, and then anything from a photos process. You know, it's got to be a great experience for them. You know, some of the other things that determine, you know, when you're going to put your event on is when you have time, but based against all the other activities or events in your charity or the charity that you're working with. You know, when is the timer available? I mean, that's really the first thing I do is, okay, we got to check dates. So is the venue available? Is the timer available? Is it, you know, other things surrounding? Is it, okay, for us down in the South, SEC, it's football. So we've also got to check the football schedule to see who is playing in town or out of town. I don't know how that affects you guys, but that is something we certainly check for in our area. And then, you know, the way I do it is I check race calendars. So I have a calendar and results up on my website. So I am pretty much the go-to place for Birmingham for what are your results from the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, and then also what are the events coming up. I don't have all of them, but I have like probably 90% of the events. So you can see from a historical perspective what was last year, and do I really want to be up against this particular race? And you know, I can tell you that you definitely don't want to be against this one, or this one, so pick a different date. So, you know, so once they kind of say, okay, yeah, I'd like to put on a race, you know, start planning a race, you got to come up, you know, first timers, you know, you got to come up with a race name. And that sometimes is pretty hard. And that's why sometimes it takes a year to 9 months. So you got to come up with a race name. Do you want to put it as you know, an annual event? You got to find out where you can have your event, because there may be other races that are on that same date and using your event. So you got to figure out your race date, race distances. You know, you may want to do just a 5K or a 10K. Sometimes it's a 5K and a 10K. So you got to determine those things so you can get to move forward. I always like to know what is your estimated participants, because that's, again, going to set out and be part of your goals, because it's going to help to determine what are you going to trying to achieve. And then, of course, you know, if you're starting out, then you need to develop your race committee. You know, who's going to be the race director, course manager, sponsor manager, food manager, volunteer manager, if you want to have a fun run course manager, a marketing and registration manager. And sometimes usually what I do is I sit in for as the registration manager, because that's usually what they're hiring me for. So part of the long lead items I consider is the race course, mainly because your course can change multiple times. So either you've got to Okay, so the race course, if anybody's designed a race course, you know it's like multiple iterations. You know, the first thing you want to try and do is in your area, look to see if you can reuse a USATF certified course. And here is the website at USATF that you can look by state, and then you just look in the area for your city. That's the easiest way to do it. I mean, it's already certified, and you already kind of have a good start and finish area. You know, if you have to design one, do you want to do it a loop course? Is it an out and back? Is it a point to point? You know, is it a keyhole? You know, are you guys going to design it? Who's going to design the course? And you know, typically what I do is I pretty much stay with in the Birmingham area. I only work with races really in Birmingham, Alabama, and the only reason I do that is because this is really a side business for me, and I know Birmingham really well, and I know what a good course is in specific towns. I know what the cops want or don't want us on specific roads and the reasons as to the why. But usually what I do first thing out is I get on one of these tools, and I typically use Map My Run, but I've used these other tools as well to map out a course, to come up with something like a 5K, 10K, or whatever. And then I go out on the course, you know, drive it, see if I like it, you know, get out there on your bike, or, you know, get out there and then go run it. Because, you know, I like to see if it's, you know, if there's any road closures, or did I get on a wrong street? Because sometimes our streets are not well marked, or Google Maps may not have the update where it's like now changed from a two-way to a one-way. So those are the things I try and look for before I move to the next phase. So I go through a couple of phases. I map it out online, print it out, go drive it. You know, I come back, you know, sometimes, most times, redo it because I didn't like it. So anyway, so kind of what I look at in terms of my rules of engagement is always, you know, when you're considering to create a race course, obviously everybody knows that when you are running a race, you are running with traffic because you're really acting as a parade. So that's always key and critical to remember. You're running with traffic instead of against traffic. So when I'm running on my own, I run against traffic because I want to see what's coming ahead. But when you're running a race, you run with traffic, unless you have permission from the police officers that you can run in an opposite direction. And I have done that quite frequently on some specific races where we have collaborated with the police to make course changes to where it's highly beneficial to run against traffic. And when we do that, obviously everything's very well coned. There's plenty of lane for the runners, as well as, you know, cars can get through on a 4-lane road or something like that. So there are rules, but you have to have specific permission for you guys to do that. But anyway, so always remember you run with traffic, because a lot of people, believe it or not, race directors don't know that. But so it's something you have to be cognizant of. The other thing I always think about is safety. You want to have safety for your runners. When you design a course, safety for your volunteers. I always think very cognizantly about where I place a water stop, mainly because it's got to be safe where I can put tables, I can have volunteers park their cars, and that the runners are safe. And it's, you know, so I'm thinking, you know, avoid curves, avoid turns, make sure there's plenty of space. So I think very consciously about where I position my water stops. Yeah, it's always something I'm thinking about, and really any time a race director puts an event on, safety comes first. Anything you do is safety first. About your development, design, and thought processes is safety first, because it's not a matter of if something happens, it is strictly a matter of when things happen. And if you've been in the business long enough, you know stuff happens. Bad things do happen, and everything's about mitigation. And, you know, up front, what can you do to mitigate the situation, a situation from happening? And then, you know, we'll talk about later, you know, what do you do if a situation does happen? So safety first. You know, what effect on the community does it have? You know, we're in this little small town called Homewood, and you know, there's almost a race in Homewood every weekend. So we have to be very cognizant about where we go in this particular city, because we do block most of the city of Homewood when we put on a 5K race. So it's like, sorry dudes, but we got a permit, so we're coming through. You know, the other things I do think about consciously is the start and finish. You know, is your start and finish going to be the same place? How far is it from your venue location? Is it in visual range? I really do consciously think about that. It's really important that, I think, that you have everything within visual range of your course to your venue. You can have it otherwise, but you just have to do things differently, like communicate that things are, your venue is here and you got to walk 2 blocks down here. So if you have something that is not within visual range, you have to do other things to ensure that the runners know where to go to get to the start, where the finish is. So me personally, I try and always do start and finish at the same place, because if you're doing chip timing, it's far cheaper. So that's always something to think about. And again, is the start and finish close to the venue area? Does your medical team have access? So if you've got to if you have a finish line situation where you have to medical transport somebody out, does that ambulance have access in and out without impacting anything? So that's always something to think about, is where you're going to put, your EMS services. Do you have a tent? Where is all that in the finish line, post-finish line area, and can that medical staff get that transported person out? And again, it is not a matter of if, it is absolutely a matter of when it happens, because it happens. Especially down in the South where things are warm and humid, we have a bad tendency to send people to the hospital because they have not hydrated properly. So, some of the other things you need to do, we've had to change courses because obviously we don't want people walking over railroad tracks or running over railroad tracks, so avoid those at all costs. Avoid railroad tracks, trust me, because the railroads, they'll come down constantly. So Birmingham has a lot of railroads because we were a steel city, so we had a lot of stuff going in. There in downtown, there's a lot of railroads. So you have to avoid those at all costs. Drawbridges, anything bridge-wise, obviously avoid those as well. And there's a lot of other things you definitely want to avoid, and you just have to know your city to know what is good and acceptable. Another thing we have to avoid in downtown Birmingham is there's a state highway in the middle of Birmingham. You can't get on that road. So you can cross it. I can cross it, but I cannot get on it. So understanding those elements will make your police approve your course a lot faster. So kind of understanding what you can and can't do is quite helpful. The other thing too is, I like I said before, run the course before you, just run it. Go run it. If you don't like it, guess what? The runners aren't going to like it. Unfortunately in Birmingham, we are hilly, and so you have to, I just tell people you're going to have to accept the fact we live in Birmingham, it is hilly. I can't avoid the hills. I mean, though you'd like a flat course, sometimes you want to have some hills, but not obnoxious hills, unless there is this one course out in Birmingham that is called Statue to Statue, and it's the southern, the South's toughest course, and it is because you're really, going up. But that's the hook. The hills are the hook. So, everything's about the hook, but 9 times out of 10, you want to try and have a nice course if you're doing 5Ks built for charity events. That's kind of the premise that I have, unless that's the hook, where it's it's harder than hell type of hill race. So, get your course approved by the police before you certify it, because guess what? I can tell you for a fact, police are going to tell you, oh, no, you're going to change that because we don't like it. And they'll sometimes suggest changes based on their experience with events in their city. So get the cops to approve it before you certify it, and that's why I'm saying it takes 9 months to a year to get this done, because that takes time between the police getting back to you and the certifier getting his or her work done, and then you getting a certified course back. Get a PDF copy of it, and you can always do, change it to a JPEG or however you want to get it. Put that up on your website. Put it up on RunSignUp, so people can see that. You can also use MapMyRun, and obviously, if everybody knows, MapMyRun and RunSignUp are combined. So you just put the URL from MapMyRun into the RunSignUp, and you can have a link that goes off and goes to that online course map. So again, here's the and I've added a link here of course certifiers for your particular area. So they're up on the USATF site. just also don't forget that there's permits that are required, at least for the city of Birmingham. I can't say for everybody's, respective areas, but we have to typically put a race permit in, a road blockage permit in, and also a noise permit in. So make sure you understand all the permitting processes and documents that have to be submitted, and understand the timeframes by which they respectively need that. The bigger your race, the sooner you need to do that, and the sooner you put your permit in, the better off you are to get that approved for your particular date. Now, I know my city in Birmingham is horrid about getting back to you about, yeah, we've approved your course and here's your costs. So typically we don't know the costs until right before, but we're trying to, tell the cops, we need to really know, the cost from a budgeting perspective. So we're working with them to get a little bit better. But it is a huge budget item. I mean, if you've got experience in that area, you just need to know that there's some huge budgeting areas. I mean, that's one of our biggest things in Birmingham. So on to the next area in setting up an event or talking through an event is the online registration, getting that set up, and which one you're going to use. I always say we're going to use RunSignUp because it's a really great app. There's different options. Oh, there you go. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, seriously, all but one of the events that I do is on RunSignUp, and the other one has to use Conterra because that's just who they are. They're one of those events that is big, and they use Conterra. So anyway, the key thing is offer the no extra fee, the sign-up fee. Just bump your price up and include that fee, and just advertise that as we don't charge fees, but you've just built it into your pricing strategy. So that's an option we do for the Rum Shaker. So we have a strategy, we actually have several strategies which I'll talk about. Key thing, I swear to God, people, you gotta do price breaks. As a general rule, I like to do 4 price breaks. I do an early price break, it's either it's 2 weeks out there or a month out there, but it's really early. We try and push, hey, we got registration up, here's a great time to get yourself signed up. And then we also do, again, the referral codes. So I do early registration, early bird registration, regular registration, late registration, and then race day registration. And that, for me, that drives, am I on track or am I not? And that's really key and critical for me to know is, am I on track or do I need to do something to get myself back on track, or am I ahead of track? So sometimes I'm seeing races are lagging between last year and this year, and so I'm like, we need to do something to drive some registrations. What do we got to do? So driving the, getting the price breaks helps to create talking points, as I call it. So it gives you more opportunity to get out there and talk about the event. Hey, we're about to have a price increase. Don't forget, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously using the incentive referrals. There's probably some, I think there was one earlier this morning on that. So I definitely recommend it. It is not the initiator, but it is getting the social movement going. You've got to start something else to initiate the registration, and then the incentive component really takes off. So it doesn't it doesn't initially drive it, but it can help drive it once it's once it's built. So, as I always say, you want to create a promotional plan and strategy for opening registration. You just don't want to put it out there. I mean, you've got to work with your marketing folks with that organization and say, you got to kickstart, and what are you going to do? How are you going to kickstart that? I mean, you've got to, if you want to kickstart it and get it going, create that plan, and then create a plan for how are you going to market that event throughout the life cycle of, including race day. Even if it's just a high level, this is what we want to do, I want to do Facebook, boosts, all those different things. You've got to put a budget for that. You're going to do posters, how are you going to get the word out? Are you going to do third-party events? Those kinds of things. And then so I've also got another slide from Running USA on their entry fees. Hopefully you can see that. This is, again, the Running USA surveys a lot of different events across the nation. And so this is the results of, what entry fees, were paid for by different 5K, 10K, half marathon. You know, with Rum Shaker, we start at 20 bucks. We start at 20 bucks for a team member, which is pretty doggone cheap. And then we add another $5 discount. It's the cheapest race in town. It is the cheapest race in town. And the goal, you know, but our goal is really to make money, but it's also to gain participation. Because if you have a fun time, you'll come back next year. And guess what? You've just been introduced to colon cancer awareness. So it's really, you know, it's the key drivers. We want to, you know, we want to have people understand that colon cancer is survivable by early detection. And if you are brought into that event, you are going to learn something about colon cancer. So that's kind of the premise behind that. So again, it's all about the strategy and why we're putting on the event. So we don't make it ridiculously out of control. We do want to get a wide range of people that are impacted, and sometimes it's socioeconomic, where the most impacted individuals don't have the funds to get checked or understand what colon cancer is. So we try and make it where it's affordable to pretty much anybody, and try and bring them in and have a good time. So that race definitely is one of those that crosses a wide demographic perspective, which we're very pleased and proud of. So you can at least see, you know, what is the percentage of, you know, half marathons, or what's the prices. Obviously, New York Marathon is probably not listed in here, but you know, so we start at 20. Most of my events start at 25, and we pop $5 every, say, month or 5 months, you know, 3 months or whatever. Depends on when we start it. But we pop it up, you know, up to, you know, I usually go up to about $35 come race day for a 5K. And we go up to maybe $45 for a 10K in town. And so we have other events that may go up to like $100 or something, $120 for a half marathon. So again, it's regional, not saying what you need to do, but it's definitely something to think about and build that into your budget. You may want, it may be a strategy for how you do, you know, how you build your budget. So getting into the details of the event, you know, of course, you've got the race date and time, you've got the location when you do packet pickup. All these things are key and critical, because guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to get RunSignUp ready to go. And all these things are what runners like to know. Where's the location of the start and the finish? What are your age groups? Are you doing awards for 5-year age groups, 10-year age groups? What are you doing? So these are the things you got to start thinking about quite early enough, because again, it goes into your budget. Are you doing awards for 5-year age groups or 10-year age groups? Is the cost difference? You know, what are your entry fees? You know, for pre-register race day, mail-in entries. You know, do you have have you got a race app ready to roll? What does it have on it? Have you checked it? Has somebody else checked it? Because sometimes people forget to put their email address or what's the date of birth. So have somebody else check it. Have somebody else check your race app, because I've done it. I've forgotten the T-shirt, and I'm like, oops. So have somebody else check it. What's nice here is, you know, choose your T-shirts. What sizes are you going to offer? You need to put that into, obviously, RunSignUp. But what's nice is you can use the inventory tool. So if you are trying to be conservative, we've used the conservative method for T-shirts, and we've used the inventory. So it does not allow a T-shirt to be sold or to be offered if it's not available in the inventory. Number two, the other trick I use, if a T-shirt's not available, I offer a -$5 for no T-shirt. So I feel it's fair and equitable. If we don't give you a T-shirt, I reduce your entry fee by $5, and it works wonderful. You just put -$5, no T-shirt. And that seems to satisfy a lot of people. I've not had a complaint yet. And so we've started doing that as a kind of a fair and equitable way of, you know, we said we're going to order 500. We are out of the smalls. You know, you have a no T-shirt option, or you can choose something else. We found that has worked quite well. Of course, you need to start getting your sponsor logos, and I'll have some more information on sponsors here shortly. Who's benefiting the race? You know, sometimes we work with race clubs, and you know, do you have a beneficiary? Well, I know you guys are the beneficiary, but are you having another beneficiary? You know, where you're going to take a part of your proceeds. So you know, you got to understand who's the beneficiary. And then donations to the beneficiary, by all means, set up donations, set up donations, set up donations. And I will say, for Rum Shaker in particular, and this is something I told Brian, we moved Rum Shaker from another application, online registration, over to RunSignUp in 2016. We had a nice increase in participant registrations, but our biggest increase was in donations. and our increase was $10,000. And that was just the increase from the prior year. So overall, we made $21,000 just in donations. Just in donations. And the reason I say that is the other app we were using, there was just a disconnect between registration and donation. So as you run through the process, you are asked, would you like to make a donation? And that is key and critical. I pretty much get paid for by donations alone, because it is easy to do, simple to set up, and I call it free money. And all you have to do is put very simple stuff in there. The marketing message about your charity, you get that from the charity, and you just drop it right on in there. And a nice, simple message does not have to be complex. So if whoever's not doing donations, you are losing money. Set up donations. I call it free money, but we made more money this past year from setting up donations than that whole race. Make sure you have your waiver. Got your waiver? Website, you got to make sure if you want to have website stuff, I always like to have a website, a domain name. Regardless if you have a website, you can take that domain name, plug it in, just repoint it to a RunSignUp. I like to use a domain name like SaveTheOs5K.com, repoint it to RunSignUp. I use that on my posters and my marketing material. So it's about my brand. It's all about my brand. And then I got some information here about choosing your timer. Are you going to do pull tag? Are you going to chip timing? I usually suggest for a charity race, if you're 500 or less, pull tag is sufficient. It's cost effective, unless, which I have a race that's maybe 250 that I have to chip time, but that's a requirement, so we have to get a chip timer. Make sure you get a quote from them. It's in writing. It has the date, and then you confirm. Number two, make sure you confirm about, keep confirming with your timer, even, a month out, 2 weeks out, a week out. Make sure you get the bib numbers to that timer if it's chip. All those types of considerations, that's really key and critical. Volunteer module is up on RunSignUp. Use that. There's lots of stuff there. Have a communication plan with your volunteer coordinator. So if you have a situation on course, what is your plan? If you have a runner go down on course, what is your plan? I've had runners go out on course. Thank God that that particular person that went out on course had a nurse there. She knew enough to have that person transported. But have a plan, have a communication plan. I need to know, as a race director, that person went to the hospital. I need to know who they are, what is their bib number. So if you don't know anything else other than bib number, have a communication plan in place for, volunteers contact the volunteer coordinator reach out to me. I work with the staff members. We make decisions about how we're going to manage that situation. So have a plan. Teams might be an option for you. So make sure you think about how to do teams. That's really my specialty, is working with online registration, and it really does drive more revenue if you do have teams, but it is extra work. I will tell you, it is extra work, but it does drive a lot more revenue. With RumpShaker, we do the $5 less if you have a 5-member team. We do use the feature, or we will use the feature this coming year in 2017 for the 5, if you get 5 members, everybody gets a $5 discount. So at least we get our money up front, and then you get the discount in the back. Team captain responsibilities and team packet pickup. Put your rules of engagement around those two things and communicate to the team captains. Donations, like I was saying before, definitely set it up. I always set up different price points, so they can just click a button. So it's 200, 100, so make it easy for them. Just click a button. And there are also the feature of, just if you want to put $5, you can do that. Post-race, make sure you thank all your donors. Just send them a nice thank you note, and it'll make a world of difference. Sponsors and vendors, develop a sponsorship proposals, and most sponsors would expect a return of value instead of just a donation to the event. So make sure you understand that it's a return of value, and you've got to give them something back. There's two types of sponsors. One is, a sponsor provides a budgetary line item, but you make sure that item is in your budget. It's just reduced by, giving you stuff. And then a sponsor that does not give you budgetary item. It's a nice swag item, but it's, we call it, you get a donation at half the price. So lots of other information here, because I'm kind of running out of time. Marketing plan, set your timeline, make a plan, decide what's newsworthy, identify your target media and local newspapers, foster relationships with the media, but give them ample time to, get your information out, because again, they're not going to respond like ASAP because they too have other work going on. And then other details, ordering bib numbers, prepping your postcards, posters, you're determining your awards, like we talked earlier. If you've got cash awards, if it's over $600, you've got to get their social security number or a non-resident tax document. So you need to get, you can hear me. You need to get that as well. Develop your race site layout. Where's registration? Where's food? Make sure you order porta potties. Porta potties are typically a 1 to 100 relationship, number of participants to porta potties. Coolers, make sure you have enough coolers. Make sure you have enough coolers all on site. And I use the ratio of a 10-gallon cooler is 200 cups. It's very easy math for me when I can do it in my head. So I know pretty much quickly how many coolers I'm going to need. And then obviously cups. So you can get those sometimes from different vendors, or if you guys have them, you can order that. Other details, course signage on course, right, left turns because I have A-frame signs that are right and left combined. You just flip it around and it works. So, so you got to have somebody to take that stuff out. Secure insurance. Okay, let me repeat. Make sure you have race insurance, because it's not a matter of if something happens, it is a matter of when things happen. God, we've not had situations where we've had to have that, but there are untold stories of things. So make sure you have race insurance. You can get it from two places that I'm aware of, RRCA, Roadrunners Club of America, and USATF. And there's probably, if you're a nonprofit, you probably have your entity that does your D&O insurance. You probably get some insurance there, but have insurance for the event. A lot of people think that I'm putting on an event that I'm insured. The answer is no, you are not. Because you are external, you're outside, there are things outside of your control. You need to talk to your insurance company, make sure you have insurance. So am I good? Oh, prep a race day script. The other thing is really key and critical. I have a race day script that the announcer gets. I also keep I also create a lanyard with my race day agenda, everything that's on, what's going to happen, it's in detail, and then also key phone numbers on the back. So that's on me at all times. It's also on all of the major volunteers. I put it in my water stop bins so that there's, if you need to reach it, there's information. So lanyards, I just make it, I make them. Seriously, I make it, and then I just laminate it, and then I turn it upside down, put the clip, so I can go flip like that. So you don't have to buy the professional stuff. You can just really make your own. Secure your, your good, swag bags, medical plan, race day phone list, and I just get checklists. I mean, I'm a checklist person, so I got checklists everywhere. So and here's the thing for hired help. If you are hiring a race director or a consultant, a timer, get a contract. I mean, you should get a contract. At a high level, that contract should have the race name, the date, the location. It also should have the scope of work, what I am doing as a consultant, and what I'm expecting the race charity to provide. I have both sides of that and because I'm PM, so the scope of work is, if you don't give me this, I can't do this. So I have clarity on what I'm expecting of you, and I have clarity of what I'm going to deliver to that person. So kind of always ask for a contract or something in writing. And I am about done, because the rest of it, these are just reference websites. I think RunSignUp folks are going to get this presentation out to you guys. I've got a lot of different reference pages here. Road race management, if you guys noticed, this book right, well, I think I just lost it. Is it on? It's on. So this book right here, you can get this from Road Race Management. It is a organizing running events. It's about a $100 book. And if you are anywhere wanting to be an RRCA certified race director, this is the book they'll have you purchase. I suggested, I'm also a RRCA certified race director. There's stuff like new, there's some stuff you always learn. And this is really a good reference guide. I've used it in some of the pieces that ran out of here into this presentation came out of this book. So it's a great reference tool. So I definitely suggest it. Getting your RRCA certification is also good. And a bunch of other websites here for reference, course mapping tools, certification. And then I have another one here, reconcile where your bib numbers, because I always forgot where my bib numbers, so I put it on my website. And so there you go. And safety pins, I don't know. I found cleaner supply to be the cheapest safety pins. So I just recommend those guys. Not that I get any kickback, but they are the cheapest place that I've found. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, and that, my friends, is it.